Welcome, folks. We are so glad to have you here. I know we have people joining from all over, so welcome, welcome. My name is Danielle. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the CEO of Women Talk Design. I'll be helping facilitate tonight's conversation. And if you haven't already, please say hello in the chat. We'd love to just hear where you're joining from and who you are, so please say hello. A quick piece that I want to share. So we are recording today's session. We want to make sure that folks who couldn't attend still get to hear LaDonna's story and advice. And we also have live captions to make sure to follow well. So you'll see in the top of your screens, and that says live streaming with Otter. If you click on that, that will show you captions. I also dropped that link in the chat so you can follow along there. If you haven't been to a Speaker Stories event, I want to start off sharing a little bit about why we're doing this series. We have over 600 women and non-binary folks now on the Women Talk Design platform, and they all have such incredible stories and experience and backgrounds. And so we started this series because we really wanted to be able to hear from our different speakers, hear how they got and speaking, how they approach crafting their presentations, and think about things like writing books or facilitating workshops. And so each week we've been doing these series where we can interview a different speaker and then really open it up to you as well. We want to hear what questions you have and give you time to connect with one another. So I have some questions I'm going to start off with for our conversation. And then I encourage you to think about what are some of the questions that you want to ask LaDonna, because we'll open it up to Q&A about halfway through. And then I do hope that you can stick around for the last 15 minutes of the session. We reserve that time to give folks who attend a chance to meet one another. So we have a couple of prompts, and then we'll put you all in breakout rooms to say hello and chat before we all come back together and say good night, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. So without further ado, I'm really, really thrilled to introduce you to our speaker for this event, LaDonna Witmer Willems. Along her personal journey to find her own voice, LaDonna has been a newspaper journalist, advertising copywriter, a copy director, and a poet. She's currently one of the editorial gurus on the Dropbox brand studio team in San Francisco, creating and facilitating the most powerful expressions of the Dropbox voice. In minutes, writing lessons, she's also writing a book. LaDonna has written about, spoken about, and led workshops on permission to speak. She's most recently spoken at Off Fest, Invisible Talks, Pause Fest, Remote Design Week, and Ladies Wine Design. And one of the reasons I'm really thrilled to have her here is, as you heard with the title of the presentation that she gives and the words that she's written, LaDonna really openly shares her journey to finding her voice. And so I think she has a really unique perspective of how she took that and started public speaking. So please help me welcome LaDonna.
Thank you, everyone.
Awesome, LaDonna, really happy to have you here. And I'd love to get started to just hear a bit about how you started your journey to public speaking and how you took that first step.
Yeah, I actually started when I was a kid. I was always told I was shy. I've taken all the tests. I'm an introvert, but for some reason being on stage is very energizing to me. And so I did, plays and debates and stuff when I was a kid. And then I was really into the Chicago poetry slam scene back in the day. So that was really, those were my first experiences with standing on stages and speaking to people. But I had never really done it for my job. Those were always just for competitions or for fun or, more creative outlets, artistic outlets. So when I started at Dropbox 2.5 years ago, my boss said, the company is really supportive of people here. If you want to speak at conferences, just let me know. They'll be all about it. And I remember thinking, like, what would I speak about? What would I have to say about my job? So I was like, okay, cool, thanks, but no thanks. I was dealing with a lot, having just come into tech and feeling kind of like an imposter there anyway. So the thought of people wanting to hear what I had to say about my job was um, just foreign to me. Um, and it wasn't until I had this whole situation happen that really precipitated a lot of thinking for me about permission and giving myself permission and all these looking around at other people and being like, we're so many of us are just waiting for someone to tell us that it's okay for us to share our story. Um, and it was once I really latched onto that as a topic that I was like, okay, I'm ready. I have something that I want to say that really matters to me and I think will matter to a lot of other people. So that was kind of where this whole journey started.
Yeah, that's great. I'm sure a lot of folks can relate to that idea of what would I even speak about,
Yeah.
and feeling a bit of that imposter syndrome. Once you came to that topic, I'm curious, like, why did you decide that this was something that you wanted to speak about? If you can share a little bit more about, I know that written and spoken about that journey, but for folks here who, are maybe curious about how did you like land at that idea and why did you think it was really important to share? If you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Um, I was raised in a really conservative environment, both politically, which didn't seem as big of a deal at the time, and more importantly, for this story, religiously. And so, I was just raised in this world where women were submissive and silent. That was the ideal way to be. And even though fairly early on, I felt constrained by that and felt like that there was something wrong with it. It was a long time before I was able to really break out of it. So all of those early lessons that were taught to me by literally everyone in my life, my parents, my school teachers, because I went to a private Christian school, my church that was huge in my life, my, you know, friends' parents, my grandparents, everyone was feeding into this idea that, you as a woman are sub to a man. The men are the ones in control. They're the ones who have power. They're the ones that God anointed to do all the things. And so you just have to make men comfortable. And I've realized, I mean, I grew away from that thinking when I was in my 20s, but I've really realized, now I'm in my 40s, and I realize how much those lessons have just become this a part of my subconscious, a part of my bones, really. Like they're just there without me even realizing it, and still hold me back in a lot of ways that it's kind of like with this, it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz, once you've seen behind the curtain, you can't unsee it. And you start to notice all the ways that it's permeated your life. But until you have that moment that you pull aside the curtain, you're really unaware. So um, yeah, once I saw this pattern in my life, which was only about a year and a half ago, I was just like, wait a second, I have been a writer my whole life. I've been using words my whole life. I've been like really outspoken about a lot of things. I'm comfortable on the stage. I'm doing well in my career, and yet I'm still waiting for people in positions of power, and usually those people are men. I'm still waiting for them to give me permission, not just to speak, but to do things, to go after things in my career and my life that were my idea first. But it's been like until they are like, oh yeah, you should do that. Um, it's almost like I needed them to give me the go ahead. Even when I was in my 20s, I doing all these poetry slams, I had I wanted to write a book, like a little poetry book. And but I kept thinking I'm not good enough, my stuff's not good enough. And it wasn't until a guy I had a crush on said, you know what, you should like write one of those poetry books. And I was like, oh, yes, I should, And so years later I look back at that, I'm like, why did it have to be his idea? Why did I have to wait for a guy to say, you should do this? And then I was like, okay, I can do this now. So that's what's up with permission to speak.
Yeah, I love that. That's so powerful. And once you had that conviction of like, okay, I, have reflected on this and this is what I want to speak about, what was that process like for turning those ideas into a talk, a presentation, and ultimately now a book, right? You're working on a book for this?
Yes, it's a book kind of inspired by this. It's turning out to be a bit more of a memoir than a
Mm,
how to find your voice sort of a book. But ironically, the first thing I did when I had this idea was I asked for permission to do it. I went to my boss and said, "Hey, remember when you told me that Dropbox supports speakers? What if it's not a topic that's really about Dropbox? What if it's not about my job, it's just about voice. It's and not about brand voice, about personal voice." And she was all about it. She got it right away. And so I started writing, which is where everything starts for me. So for different people, the process is different. But for me, it started with writing. And I literally wrote everything out longhand before I did. Okay, well, not longhand, like, I typed it, but you know what I mean. I wrote an entire script. I wrote this, like, giant story before I ever started putting it to slides and breaking it up and making sure that it was something that worked as a spoken piece and not just an essay or something like that. So, I did a ton of research. Also, I just had a, like, Google Doc that for months, every time I read an article or I thought about something, I would just drop it in there so that I could pull it out of there and kind of plug it in because I wanted to start with a personal story because I felt, if we're talking about personal voice, I need to go there as well. I need to give my audience something vulnerable because I'm asking them to be vulnerable back. I'm kind of choosing or pointing that out as the core of finding your voice is being real about who you are, all the you know, knobby, hairy parts about who you are, not just the perfect social media parts. And if I'm going to ask people to do that, I also have to do that. So that's where I started, but I didn't just want it to be about me. And I felt like for some people I might have to prove the case. And so I included a lot of research as well about voices being silenced. It's easy to find that, especially when you look at women in particular, statistics and anecdotes and all sorts of things. So from there, it just kind of started to come together. And then I tested it out with a few people, some friends. I had a little practice speaking session with them. And I also did it with people from work and then went back and took their feedback and rewrote it. So that was the process.
yeah, that's great. Did you have a planned place to deliver it at that point? Or did you craft this saying, I then want to go find speaking opportunities? Or did you have an opportunity that was coming up and then you were planning up to that?
Yeah, I started with no scheduled events. And at Dropbox, we have so brand studios within Dropbox Design, and within Dropbox Design, there's a woman who's a program manager. So she is kind of in charge of community events. And so I went to her. Her name is Michelle Morrison, and she's brilliant. And I went to her and said, I've been writing this. I have this idea. What do you think? And she said, I'm absolutely going to hook you up. We're going to do this. And I've called her my fairy godmother. She basically was like my agent at that point. And she came back a week later and said, how do you feel about Tel Aviv in the fall at this design conference? And I was like, yeah. So that was my first event. It was the Off Fest, which is for designers primarily. And part of finding places to speak in the beginning, particularly, we were going for a more creative audience. Uh, and we thought designers and writers will fully get this. But as time has gone on and this has become more of a full program, we've broadened it to I mean, I've had accountants in my workshops. It's become really clear that this is a universal topic. It's not related to women. It's not really, or not just related to women. It's not just creative people. Every single culture in every country gets it. Everybody feels it. So we've taken it a lot more places since then. But it started in Tel Aviv. My first audience was about 500 people. And weirdly enough, I really like bigger audiences because everyone just blurs out. You just have this auditorium full of little white heads kind of blurred. And when there's 10 people in the room all staring at me, I can see their eyeballs, I can see their facial expressions, and that makes me way more nervous than 500.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know everyone has their different kind of groups of like, I'd rather be able to see, but I'd rather not. So I'm glad you shared that. I'd love to hear more about this evolution of the topic. So from the first couple of times that you delivered this as a talk, I know that you've since given workshops on it, and we're working on this book that it sounds like is evolving. And I'd love if you can just share more about how that process has looked and how maybe
Sure.
you've continue to set goals or check in on those goals around this topic.
Yeah, it's all about bringing other people along on your journey, right? So I had Michelle Morrison, and she is one of those people who just plugs others into the right sockets and introduces you to the right people and also pushes you. And so she said very, very soon after, she was one of my early listeners as well. And very soon, as it was in development, she said, I think that this should be a workshop as well as a talk. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. I've never done a workshop. I have no idea. And so we brought in another person named Jennifer Brooke, who at the time was on the design research team. And she had done a ton of workshops, and we just brainstormed together like, okay, what are the main points that I'm telling people, this is what you do to find your voice? How could we turn those into activities? And how could we create a workshop that people will be engaged, but will also leave feeling like they accomplished something? Because when you just give a talk, people are taking notes. But when you're talking about who are you really, and what do you really care about, and how does your identity relate to your voice, you can't unpack that all in 30 or 40 minutes in an auditorium full of people. You need some time and you need some guidance. And so that was where the workshop started, and it has become a really nice, the talk is kind of like an intro and evidence and a little bit about, so here's how you do it. And then the workshop is, here's how you do it, and asking really tough questions to get people thinking about, yeah, what is my identity? What are all the parts of my identity, the things that I've chosen for myself, but also the things that I've inherited and that I can't do anything about, but it makes up part of who I am. And how does that affect my voice? And how do I identify the things that I actually really want to use my voice to speak about, or to, and part of this whole thing is that your voice isn't just words, right? It's all the ways that you express yourself. So it's helping people figure that out as well. Like, what is my channel? What is my audience? Stuff like that. I actually, I should have gotten it down. Pardon me, I'm gonna open my cabinet a minute. But we actually created
show and tell.
Yes, we created a workbook as well, which has come in really handy during COVID times. When we can't do the workshop in person. I've been doing it over Zoom. So it's this personal voice workbook, and it's really gorgeous. And we modified some of the activities to work so you can do it on your own. So I will, when I stop talking, I'll grab the link and drop it in the chat, because you can just, there's a Google form, you just order it, it's free, and Dropbox will mail it to your house. And also it comes with really cool stickers. So yeah.
That's awesome. I think that'll be such a great resource for everyone. So thank you for sharing that. And then how did this then evolve into, so that is a workbook, but now it sounds like you're working on a full book, a long extended book. And can you tell us a little bit about how that came to be and what that process has looked like?
So this conference in Tel Aviv, Michelle and I were sitting at a table um, the day after I had given my talk. And I told her, several people have come up to me and said that I should write a book. I was like, I've always wanted to write a book. What do you think? And she was like, yeah, you should absolutely write a book. And she was kind of answering her work emails while we were talking. And I was like, yeah, but no one would want to read it. I mean, I'm just some white woman from Illinois. Like, what do I really have? And I went on for like 15 minutes just telling her all the reasons why I shouldn't write a book. And she finally just shut her computer and she's like, LaDonna, you stood on a stage yesterday and told 500 people to stop silencing themselves. And what are you doing to yourself right now? And I was like, oh shit, I have to write a book. She was like, yeah, you really do. So that was where it started. Um, and I knew I didn't want to write a how-to book because I don't like to read how-to books and I don't want to write something that I wouldn't want to read. And I had, as a part of permission to speak, I started reading a lot of memoirs because it became really important to me to part of kind of the yin to the yang of finding your voice is also hearing other voices that aren't like your own. And so I had started seeking out memoirs, and my rule was it can't be written by a white, straight, cis woman. It has to be written by someone who's different from me. And so I've been just devouring all these books. And so I thought, well, maybe I could do some sort of a memoir that unpacks a lot of the early reasons for why I silenced my voice, and so it's really become about not being able to ask questions, and that as part of the silencing in the culture that I grew up in. You just accept what you're told and you don't ask questions. But I always ask questions, and that has been a significant part of my journey. Um, so yeah, that's where the book started. And then I had no idea. I mean, I've been a writer my whole life, my entire career, and I had no idea how to start writing a book, mostly because I was just really intimidated by it. I can write a poem, no problem, but a book feels monstrous. And luckily, at the time at work, I sat next to a lovely human named Chris Beatty, who is the founder of National Novel Writing Month. And he got wind of this idea I had, and he said, well, you should just do National Novel Writing Month to get your book started. And I was like, well, I'm not writing a novel, Chris. And he was like, it doesn't matter, you're writing a book. So just use the premise of National Novel Writing Month. And the premise is that you write every day in November. I can't remember the average. I think you have to write like 6,600 words a day in order to get to 50,000 words by the end of the month. And so the idea is that you have a first draft by the end of the month, and it can be a really shitty first draft, but at least you've gotten started. And so that's what I did. And it was like writing blind. I had no idea where I was going. I just had my flashlight pointed at my toes and slowly started to figure it out. And it was brilliant. It was having a 50,000 word count, even if you know you're going to throw most of those words away, you still feel like you got started. You have a place to go now. Yeah. So that was how the book got started.
Yeah, I love this theme that you're sharing of surrounding yourself with people who are cheering you on and really helping support you along the way. It sounds like a lot of people have been instrumental in this journey.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, we're going to open it up to Q&A in just a moment. So I encourage you all to start thinking of your questions. You can write them in the chat, or if you'd like to speak them out loud, you can say, I have a question just in the chat so that I know I can say, hey, Rebecca, or whoever it is, feel free to unmute and ask that question. But in the meantime, I do have a couple of other questions to ask. So folks, start thinking, start typing out your questions, and then we'll turn to those. So I'm curious, where are you right now with the book writing? So was that just recently that you were doing the monthly writing, or was that longer ago and now you're moving on to a different stage?
So yes, I did National Novel Writing Month last year, 2019 in November. And then this year, I kind of have been trying to plug away at it. Of course, no one knew what this year was going to give us. So it's been, I mean, I think it's always difficult. Writing's always difficult, right? And I love it once I'm in the flow of it, but I don't love it when I feel it hanging over my head. So I right now I'm still in the midst. It turns out the first draft I came up with was really like notes. um, I'm truly in the middle of my first draft now. I'm planning on 20 chapters. I have 8 finished, and my plan is I like to be very prepared, and so I am going to pitch to an agent within the next month with 3 finely polished chapters and a table of contents, and hopefully get an agent and then get a publisher from there.
That's really exciting. We'll all be cheering you on.
Thank
Uh,
you.
And I mean, it sounds like you must have learned so much in this journey, even just from, I think you said it was maybe a year and a half ago or 2 years from when you first started writing about this to turning it into a talk to now working on a book. And I'm curious, from all the things that you learned, if there was a piece of advice that maybe someone shared or that you just picked up along the way that's really resonated that you would share with other folks who are maybe thinking about getting started speaking, or, just figuring out, any advice that you might have.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna borrow appropriately enough since it's vice presidential debate night. I'm gonna borrow from Kamala Harris. And I can't even remember. I think I follow her on Instagram because she's a, Oakland, San Francisco woman. And so I've known about her for a long time. And not, I think it was last year even. It doesn't matter. I'm giving you too many details. The point is, she was asked a question by a young girl who looked to be about in junior high at an event. And the girl said, how do you, when you're speaking in public, how do you deal with nerves? How do you stop from being nervous or being self-conscious or being afraid? And Kamala said, and I don't know the exact quote, but the gist of it was that when she speaks, she's so passionate about what she's saying that she thinks of herself as just a vehicle or a vessel to get the message across. So then it's like she kind of doesn't matter as much as she needs people to hear this thing. Um, and it's especially with this topic, with permission to speak, I definitely feel that way as well. I have the added benefit of enjoying a large audience, but I don't know that I ever in my life have felt so much like I'm where I'm supposed to be doing what I'm supposed to be doing when I've been talking about this, because um, it feels so important. It's like once you've seen the wizard behind the curtain, you want everyone to see the wizard. And so if you can pull back that curtain even a little bit to help people start their own journeys, then you have to. And so, yeah, I think that's the best advice is when you are really connected to a topic that you're really passionate about, that passion will override any insecurities that you might have.
Oh, that's such good advice. And I love the tie-in. We're going to finish just in time for the
Yes.
VP debate. So
Yes.
thank you for that. We do have a question from Lee in the chat. Lee says, thank you for sharing your experience, and has shared that it's been a difficult year for many. Do you have any strategy for writer's block, or what do you do when you get stuck?
Yeah. Um, I feel you, Lee. I have struggled so much this year just to carve out time. And people say, well, half the battle of writing is just to put your butt in the chair. And sometimes my butt has been in the chair and I still am just it's not coming to me. And so one of the and that's not always the case, but there was a chapter in particular I'm thinking about where I was writing about my mom, who is 78, and she has dementia now. She has had for a few years, but this year it's become really apparent that it's getting really bad. And I realized that part of my writer's block was that I hadn't a lot of things I'm writing about are things that happened years ago that I've already processed and talked to a therapist about. And, I know what I want to say, but with that in particular, I was processing it on paper, and it was hard to get it out. And so one of the best things ever, not just for that chapter, but ever in my writing life, has been to have a writing group. And I've been in two. One of them hasn't survived COVID because everyone's too stressed out. But the other has come about because of COVID, and we do it on Zoom, and we're all over the country. There's four of us, and we meet every week, which at first I was like, oh my God, I don't have time to do this every week. But it's, writing groups are part therapy, part group therapy, part actual writing. But having that weekly deadline of, I'm going to meet these women on Tuesday night, and I need to have a draft of a chapter because I don't want to let them down. And the truth is, like, they're not going to be let down if I show up with nothing. They'll still be happy to see me. But in my head, having a deadline helped me be like, I have to get something down. But also giving myself permission that maybe that something is a sentence. Maybe it's a poem. Maybe it's a paragraph. Maybe it's not an entire chapter. But if I can at least put one thing down on paper and bring it to the group, then I'm pretty proud of myself for that week. And then, then that's over and I have to get ready for the next week. And yeah, so
That's good. There's that community of support again. That's great
yes,
advice.
for sure.
Awesome. Rebecca has a question too. She is on a career switch journey and is struggling with imposter syndrome. And I know that
Oh
you had
yeah.
shared that definitely crept up for you as you were starting in tech. And so if you have any advice on there that you want to share, that'd be great.
Yeah. Hey, Rebecca. I feel you. Um my first version of this talk had a whole section about imposter syndrome as well that has kind of evolved. But when I first started at Dropbox, I was coming from the world of retail. I had been at a really small children's clothing company in San Francisco for years and years, and then I was a consultant at Cliff Bar for a while. So I knew how to write about physical products that went out into the world. And then I got to Dropbox and I was like, what is this product even? Like, it's like files in the cloud, but there's other stuff. And I don't know how am I going to make people care about this? And also there was this huge culture shock of coming in from really small, scrappy companies um, of like 80 people, that never had any money to this massive machine of tech with like cereal bars every 5 feet down the, the hallway, and free food everywhere, events everywhere, swag. And I just remember for months being like, what the hell am I doing here? I am not one of these people. And also, I felt really old because everyone was like fresh out of college. And I just remember thinking, like, if they knew how old I am, they wouldn't let me be here. um, and it actually, I was at a conference for women in tech called the Within Retreat last year. And I was having massive imposter syndrome while I was there because everyone else was like leading these teams of 50 people, or they're like really creative designers or whatever. And I remember at one point in a small group that I was put in, just being like, I don't feel like I'm supposed to be here right now. I feel like I'm just a writer. And it was amazing. Every other woman in the circle said, I also feel like I'm not supposed to be here. Like, this hotel is too fancy for me, or you all have really cool jobs and I'm just a freelancer, or whatever. Every single woman had a story about how she felt like an imposter. And that made me feel so much better. um, and then we all went around reassuring each other and saying, well, I can't believe you think you shouldn't be here because of this reason or of this reason. And it just really underscored to me that way in which, we all think that everyone else feels really secure and feels like they know what they're doing. When in reality, most of us are just making it through and just doing the best we can day by day and hoping that it's good enough. Um, so I don't have a solution to it. It's kind of like at the end of my first workshop ever, I ended it by just saying, "So give yourself permission to speak." Okay, great. Have a good day. And this woman came up to me and she's like, "But how? How do I give myself permission?" And I was like, "Right. I don't really have an answer for that either because it's different for everyone. But what I can say is that with the imposter syndrome and with permission to speak, it is constantly reminding myself I am the only one who can give myself permission to speak. And I do give myself permission to speak. And I do have a right to be in this room. And I do have something to say. And with Dropbox and my imposter syndrome there, it was realizing like, oh wait, I have something to offer that nobody else in this company has because my background is unique and they hired me because of it. And so that was what gave me the, I don't know, courage, I guess, to start speaking up more in meetings and being like, well, actually, have you thought of it this way? Instead of just doing it the tech way, maybe try coming at it from this way, which is how I've done it outside of tech, and maybe that would work, and finding that people were really receptive. So I feel like that's a giant word salad thrown at you without a like, here's how you beat imposter syndrome. But really, it's like almost everyone has it, except for old white men. They don't have it, and and then you're the one who gives yourself permission, and so you have to remind yourself too that you have a right to be there, that you are worthy and you are talented, and you have something to offer that no one else around there has to offer because you're you and you have your unique talents and experiences, and that's why you're there.
I love that. That was great advice. Thanks, LaDonna. Tina just chimed in. Thank you again for sharing your experiences and wants to know how you deal with editing or getting stuck on a piece that may not be on par with how you want it to be. And maybe you're forced to release it and maybe you're not proud of it. Have you ever dealt with that in your career? And if so, how do you handle that?
Yeah, yeah. A couple of things. One is that it's if there's time to sleep on it, even and even better, like give it a week or a weekend, um, and then come back to it. If you don't have the benefit of having another reader, like a proofreader or an editor, another writer to give it some eyes, if you come back to it, even 24 hours later, whatever time you can give it to put it away and not look at it and then pull it out again helps. Um, but for the times that you can't or that didn't do a lot, and you have to let it go anyway, I think for me, it's been just being like, well, this isn't maybe the piece that's going to change the world, but that's okay. Every single thing doesn't have to be amazing. And some things just have to be good enough to get the job done. Um, and you don't have to put it in your portfolio, right? You're not, if it doesn't wow you, then just let it go and let it be.
Great. I just wrote this in the chat. We have time probably for one or so more questions. Question, singular. If you all have any questions, if you want to share now or speak up. As y'all are thinking of that, I will ask you, LaDonna, what are your hopes for what comes after this? Have you thought about, once you write this book or, in the next year or a couple of years, what are you hoping happens with your message and I guess maybe just your own goals too for speaking and writing?
Yeah. Um, it's something I've started thinking about recently, I think, because we're in the fourth quarter now. And this year was supposed to be this, Michelle called it my world tour. I had all these conferences lined up I was supposed to go to Barcelona. Um, and of course, that didn't happen because of COVID. However, I think I've done way more virtual events than I would have done real events, because I don't have to travel or make arrangements. I can just come and jump on Zoom. So actually next month I'm speaking at the UX Philippines conference, which is amazing because it's the Philippines and that wasn't on my radar at all. So I've been thinking a lot about how you shape something, you start something, and you have no idea where it's going to go. So in some ways, I feel like permission to speak is just getting started, and I'm absolutely willing to keep doing it as long as people want to keep hearing it and keep talking about it and keep doing the workshops because I really do think it applies to everyone. Um, but there's also, on the Dropbox side of it, there's kind of the like, but what are you going to do next sort of thing. Um, so I've been thinking, I'm part of a group at Dropbox called Ladies Who Create. And we just did a zine earlier this year called Feminist Propaganda. And so we're talking about version 2 of the zine. And I have this idea of interviewing a bunch of people, of women, um, at Dropbox and other tech companies whose voices don't really ever get heard. So they're not the speakers, they're not the C staff people. They're just people who have stories to tell, but no one's asking them their story, and maybe they haven't yet given themselves permission to tell it. Um, so that feels like a really lovely evolution of permission to speak. Um, and then we'll see where it goes from there. I feel like I'm in the right place doing the right thing, and the next step will become apparent when it's ready to happen.
It's really exciting. I know that everyone here would be really happy to be able to read that and hear those folks' stories. What is the best way for people to be able to stay in touch with what you're up to and follow along as you release these different things?
Yeah, I am on LinkedIn, so you can look me up there. And I don't do Twitter, but I have an Instagram channel called Words by LaDonna, and I am pretty active there, talking about whatever, wherever I'm speaking, or whatever is going on with me there. So those are two really good places to find me right now. Oh, and I have a Medium account that I think if you just search my name on Medium, it should come up. I'm completely blanking on what my Medium handle is right now. But sometimes I've published like a first draft of of the chapter. Well, actually, it wasn't about my mom. It was a different chapter. But I've been publishing some things there almost as like tests for the book and for a few other things. So that's where I've been putting my writing right now.
Fantastic. And I'll send that all in the follow-up to everyone too. I just want to say thank you so much, LaDonna. Like, it has been so incredible to hear about your journey, and even, you share your journey so publicly through your work, and being able to see kind of even the behind the scenes of that is, we're really grateful for that. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.